be severely restricted. "You checked for any signs of life, I assume?" Annie asked the young constable, making his way through the undergrowth beside her. "The paramedic did, Mum," he answered. "As best he could without disturbing the scene." He paused. "But you don't have to get that close to see that he's dead." A man, then. Annie ducked under the police tape and inched forward. Twigs snapped under her feet, and last autumn's leaves crackled. She didn't want to get so close that she might destroy or contaminate any important trace evidence, but she needed a clearer idea of what she was dealing with. As she stopped about 10 feet away, she could hear a golden plover whistling somewhere nearby. Farther up, toward the moorland, a curlew piped its mournful call. Closer by, Annie was aware of the officer panting behind her after their trot up the hill, and of the lightest of breezes soughing through leaves too fresh and moist to rustle. Then there was the absolute stillness of the body. Annie could see for herself that he was a man now. His head was closely shaved, and what hair remained had been dyed blonde. He wasn't twisting at the end of the rope the way corpses do in movies, but hanging heavy and silent as a rock from the taut yellow clothesline, which had almost buried itself in the livid skin of his neck, now an inch or two longer than it had originally been. His lips and ears were tinged blue with cyanosis. Burst capillaries dotted his bulging eyes, making them appear red from where Annie was standing. She guessed his age at somewhat between 40 and 45, but it was only a rough estimate. His fingernails were bitten or cut short, and she saw the cyanosis there, too. He also seemed to have a lot of blood on him for a hanging victim. Most hangings were suicides, Annie knew, not murders, for the obvious reason that it was very difficult to hang a man while he was still alive and kicking. Unless it was the work of a lynch mob, of course, or he'd been drugged first. If it was a suicide, why had the victim chosen this particular place to end his life, Annie wondered. This tree. Did it have strong personal associations for him, or had it simply been convenient? Had he ever realized that children might find him, and what effect seeing his body might have on them? Probably not, she guessed. When you're that close to ending it all, you don't think much about others. Suicide is the ultimate act of selfishness. Annie knew she needed the scenes of crime officers here as soon as possible. It was a suspicious death, and she would be far better off pulling out all the stops than jumping to the conclusion that nothing much need be done. She took out her mobile and rang Stefan Novak, the crime scene manager, who told her to wait and said he'd organize his team. Next, she left a message for Detective Superintendent Catherine Gervais, who was in a meeting at County HQ in Northallerton. It was too early to determine the level of investigation yet, but the super needed to know what was happening. Then there was Banks. Detective Chief Inspector Alan Banks, her immediate boss, who would normally be senior investigating officer on something as serious as this. Should she call him? He had taken off early for the weekend, driving down to London that morning to stay with his girlfriend. Annie couldn't complain. Banks had plenty of time off due to him, and she herself had recently got back from a 2-week stay with her father in St. Ives, mostly sketching and lounging around on the beach, convalescing and recharging after a traumatic period in her life. In the end, she decided that Banks could wait. It was time to get back to the river and see what Winsome had found out from the kids. Poor buggers, Annie thought, as she tottered down the slope behind the patrol officer, arms out to keep her balance. On the other hand, kids were resilient, and when they got back to school on Monday morning, they'd have one hell of a story to tell their mates. She wondered if English teachers still handed out "what I did on my holidays" assignments. If they did, they'd be in for a big surprise. After the schoolchildren had been sent home to their parents, and the uniformed officers had been sent to the car park across the river to see if the victim had left his car there, Annie leaned against a tree in companionable silence with Winsome and watched the Sockos, along with police surgeon Dr. Burns and crime scene photographer Peter Darby, work the scene in their disposable white oversuits. When they had finished photographing and examining the body in situ, they cut it down, careful to preserve the knot, and laid it on a stretcher the coroner's officer supplied. There was something unnatural about all that morbid activity on such a beautiful day, Annie thought, as if it were merely some sort of exercise or practice run. But a man was dead. That much she knew.